Hey, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Basra, Daf Samach Aleph, and we're starting with the perek called Hamocher Habayis. Sometimes when we sell things, not everything is included. When you sell a car, you don't sell all the contents of the car. You're selling the car. I left my charger in there. Charger is not yours. So sometimes when we sell a house in the times of the Mishnayos, in the times of the Gemara, and in Halacha, you're not really selling the whole thing. So now that this Mishnah is going to detail what is excluded from a sale.
Sell the car without the battery.
So says the Mishnah at the top of the page, Hamocher es habayis lo machar yitzia. If I sell a house, I did not sell the yitzia. The Gemara is going to discuss what a yitzia is. And the afal pishi psucha lesocho, even if this yitzia, which I'll just foreshadow a little bit, is a small room, even though it's open to the house, but afal piken, it's not sold with the initial sale. And veloas hacheder shelifnim heimenu, neither is this cheder. Again, we'll discuss, but we know what the word cheder means in basic terms. That too is not considered included. We'll ask why we had to say both of those. They both seem similar in that they are offshoots of the house.
One in the front, one in the back.
We'll see in the Gemara. And as well, if a person has a rooftop in their house that's being sold, let's say I'm selling my house and I have a rooftop, and I followed the halacha and built a ma'akeh. So the halacha is that if it's gavah sar tfachim, that it's not included in the sale, separate usage. It's considered a distinct area of its own, and when I sell the house, the rooftop is not included. Rabbi Yehuda Omer.
What?
And how do you get to the roof?
Well, that the Gemara doesn't discuss that.
The ladder from the outside.
Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that if the doorways that exist to this location of the makkah has a tzuras pesach, then afal pi she'eno gvoa yud tfachim eno machor. Then even if the makkah is not even 10 tfachim, afal pikein, it's still not sold. The tzuras pesach kind of gives it a little bit of a different status. Asks the Gemara on Samach Aleph Amid Aleph at the open of the Gemara 6 lines down, Ma Yitzia. So says the Gemara, a Yitzia is a machlokas amoraim. Hacha targimo afta. Rabbi Yosef Amar bidka chalila. Let's take a look at the Rashbam. At the beginning of the Gemara in the Rashbam, there are maschel afta. A fantman, I don't know what that means. Binyan namuch. It's a building that is a shorter roof. Eitzel habayis mitzido o achorav. It's typically at the side or at the back of the house. And that is what the room is. It's not typically used like the rest of the house. It's not like your kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. It's a room that's used less. In my previous house, I had a crawl space. The crawl space was 3 feet high. And one year during the winter, the pipe at the outside of the house froze. And I found myself with an extension cord lying inside the crawl space with a hair dryer, trying to defrost the pipe that had frozen while we were out of town. So that might be something similar. I have a feeling it's a little taller than this afta. And what's the bidka chalila? The Rashbam continues. Ihunami kimin afta. It's also like this room. That's a bit of a smaller room. Samach labayis. Ela she'asui chalonos lenoi. It was a room that someone could sit in, seemingly for enjoyment. A sunroom. It's a little hard to say that that's not part of the sale. When I was listening to a shiur on this morning, Rabbi Resnick said, some of these things are going to be hard for us to understand in our world. My aunt and uncle had a beautiful sunroom off of their house, right off of their kitchen. It was enclosed with netting. They never went out there really during the winter, but during the summer it was gewaldic. They had a fan, and even in the 80s and 90s, even if it was humid, the fan through the air was beautiful. Sit there drinking iced tea. It was the South. So we enjoyed it very much. So this is what the word yitzia means. It's either an afta or it's a bidka chalila. And there's a nafkamina between them. Lamanta amar afta lumizdavna. According to the one who says that when a house is sold, this afta, the room with no windows, that it's not sold, kol shekain bidka chalila lumizdavna. This is a hard svara to swallow. It seems to be that the room that is for noi, that is for enjoyment, is kol shekain not included. And Laman Damar bidka chalila. But according to the one who says that the room that was more of a sunroom is the one that's not included in our Mishnah, aval afta mizdavna. However, they would hold that the afta was sold. It seems to be that the afta was more of a usable room. I would imagine that it's kind of like that closet you rarely go into. Maybe the HVAC room, if you're not one who changes their filters often. We always have a room that we don't go into very often. Okay, so that's what is going on in our Mishnah on the top of Samach Aleph Amid Aleph. The first din of the Mishnah is that when I sell my house, it doesn't include a yitzia, and that Yitzia is either a closed-off room or it is some type of sunroom, something along those lines. We're a third of the way down on Samach Aleph and Aleph, and now
On a side topic, talking about a room. Let's say the room is $1, but it's not lived in. Does that require a mezuzah? Let's say
if it's
HVAC
shaykh
room.
to be lived in, then it can be a bathroom that's not shaykh. You know, there's rooms that
An
are not
HVAC room that's only used for HVAC.
Yeah, we have a mezuzah in our HVAC room.
It's $1.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I have a room for bris milah kalim. It also has a mezuzah on it. It has to be ru'i l'dira in concept. Not that I put a bed in there, but if you have a bathroom, that's not ru'i l'dira. Nobody sleeps in a bathroom. No, nobody normal sleeps in a bathroom.
Okay.
Nobody sober sleeps in a bathroom. Just sometimes people fall asleep in the bathtub, but it's usually after some substance abuse. Anyways, let's get back to the reservation because that was just a sharp deviation. I don't know how. I know, I did it on my own. I just finished a parenting course on substance abuse and like how we prevent substance abuse for our children. So I'm like steeped in the research. Anyways, let's go back. We're a third of the way down. Tani, just an extra aleph just for kicks. Sometimes we see this in Shas, but it's the same thing as to teach a brisa. Tani Rav Yosef. Shalosh Shemos Yeshlo, Yitzia, Tzela, and Ta. All three of these things mean the same thing. Namely, when our Mishnah says Yitzia, it could be any of these three words, and the Gemara brings Mari Makomos for each of them. Yitzia, Dichsiv, as the Pasuk says in Sefer Malachim, Hayitzia Hatachtona Chamesh Ba'ama Rachba. So we see over there that it's some type of enclosure. Tzela Dichsiv, this is a Pasuk from Yechezkel, V'hatzlaos Tzela El Tzela Shalosh Ushloshim Pe'amim. And what about the word Ta, Dichsiv? And we'll see two possible sources here. How do we know that a Ta is a small room? Ve'ata, this pasuk is also from Yechezkel. Ve'ata kaneh echad orech ve'kaneh echad rochav. Uve'natayim chamesh amos. Another possibility that we know that the word Ta is a small room. This is from Gemara that we learned many moons ago in Midos, although we wouldn't have learned it in a classical way. We would have had seen the Mishnayos. But the Gemara says in Midos, Kosel ha'hechal sheish, v'hata sheish, Kosel hata chamesh. So all of these, we're not going to go into the details of any of these Mari Makomos, but the point of the Gemara here is to teach us that the word Yitzia in our Mishnah actually is identified by three equivalent terms, which is Tzela, Yitzia, and Ta. Yitzia, Tzela, and Ta, correct. And 2/3 of the way down, we get back to the details of our Mishnah. Amar Mar Zutra, V'hu dehave arba amos. Namely, when our Mishnah says that this Yitzia is not part of the sale, that's only if the room is at least Daled Amos. If the room, that's where I thought you were going actually when you were asking, but you asked a different question in the end. But the Gemara over here says that if the Tzela, if the Yitzia, that room is only Gimel al Gimel or Gimel al Daled, any iteration that isn't 16 square Amos, so then it is part of the house. It is part of the sale. So I have a little under the stairs in my basement. I have a very small room. It's probably 3 amos by 2 amos. Pashut, that's included in the house. Afal pi that it's like the Yitzia in function, but it's so small, and I'm going to use my own language here. I didn't say this in the Rishonim. It's batel to the rest of the house. Nobody's looking at it. Oh, that's not for sale. Nobody's doing that. The room is too small. It's not functional. And Amrle Ravina Lemar Zutra, I'm not sure I understand your parameter. Mehechatesi, that Dalet Amos is even one of the metrics to assume that it should not be batil to the house, or that it should be batil to the house. After all, according to you who says that 4 amos is the distinguishing factor, that if a Yitzia is Dalet Amos, so then it's not included in the sale. And if the Yitzia is less than Dalet al Dalet, it is included in the sale. Elameata, we have a problem because we have Gabe Bor, we have a din that we've learned already. We've seen this Mishnah before. Doesn't quote it over here, but I know we've seen it elsewhere. The Tanan, the Mishnah writes, Lo es habor, velo es hados, afal pi, shekasav lo om kaveruma. Buy a bore and buy a dose, which is a cistern type of container. They're never included in the sale. Even if you include in the contract the omka veruma, even if you include the dimensions, the area of that pit. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Hachanami, why don't we say over here, by the bore and the dose, you have arba amos in ilolo? Yumar Zutra are trying to introduce a qualification in our Mishnah, and the qualification is that if the room is daled al daled, it's not part of the sale. If it's less than, it is part of the sale. But we have a Mishnah by bor and dos, by a pit and a cistern, where we see that daled al daled is not the measure. So what are you talking about, Mar Zutra? Where did you get this daled al daled from, Bichlal? The Gemara responds, Hachi hashta. That question is an incorrect question. The question that was asked by Ravina is not a good question. Why not? Hasam, when it comes to the comparison of a bore within a house, hatashmishta lechud, v'hatashmishta lechud. The pit has a function to hold water. The house has a function to live in the house. But hacha, in our case, where we're talking about in our Mishnah of a yitzia and a bias, they're just parts of the house. They're just parts of the house. It's not a commonly used part of the house, but it's part of the house. So the Gemara takes the question of bor and dos from that Mishnah, which really comes up later on Daf Samach Daled, and we reject the question altogether. And therefore, the qualification to our Mishnah stands, which is that when we are talking about a yitzia, if the yitzia is daled al daled, it is by definition excluded from the sale. If I sell a house to you and it has a room like that, it's still mine. It's still mine. I don't know how this works halacha l'maisa. I don't know. I'm sure we all have either a room like that in our house, or we know of people who have a room like that. Like some people have a junk drawer, some people have a junk room. It's not healthy, but they have one. And that room, l'chora, is not for sale. And even when you sell the rest of the house, that room remains in the house of the initial mochrim. I don't know how it works in Maseches. You have to look in Shulchan Aruch. Then the Gemara goes on to the next din of the Mishnah, which was very similar to the first din of the Mishnah. The first.
So what classifies that room that's sold or not included with the sale?
You got to just look at what the Rashbam said earlier, and then look in all the other Rishonim to see how it works out halacha l'maisa.
I'm just going to throw in another example: a tool room.
Tagos V'Tzionim writes on the side here, Binyan Katan HaNishan Al Binyan Gadol. He writes, it's a small house that it does, but
It's leaning on Nishan.
Not hard. Doesn't seem like a shed when you're reading the Gemara. It doesn't seem like that. That is what the commentaries say on what the word afantaman means. But I don't know. I don't know. Because the Gemara says that when we were mechalek between the Mishnah and Samach Dalet, we said that the tashmish of the room of the Yitzia is the same as the house. You use the room, whatever you use it. It doesn't seem like a shed. Pashat that the garage is not the same structure of the house. That's for sure true. Let's look at the next din, because hopefully it'll help us qualify a little bit what we're learning. 2 lines from the bottom on Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, we quote the next din of our Mishnah, and not the room which is before the house. So if we were to go back up to our Mishnah and look at the Rashbam on our Mishnah, on the 3rd line of the page of the Rashbams, Dibur HaMaschil v'lo asacheder, afal pishu lifnim min abayis upasuach l'socho. It's in the front of the house, and it's open to the house. Udrisaso labayis, and people can walk straight into it. Tekevan te'ein tashmisho shel bayis, since that room is not like regular use of the house. She'eno asui ela lahatzniya sham chafatzav lishmor, because the only thing you do with that room is store things there. Kimin teva, like a box. Hilkach eno bichlal bayis. This is more like a shed, which is attached to the house. So again, I'm being mechalik based on the way I didn't look at other Rishonim. I'm saying the way the Rashbam paints the picture is that the Yitzia is connected to the house, the Chora, and it's used in a similar way, but it's not a common room. The Cheder is a room that's pashut used for storage only.
Can this be a printed on the scroll? Nor has he sold the storeroom in the rear of the house. Shulchan in the front. Not in the rear.
Could be. I don't know. I didn't see that. I didn't look in the art scroll. I believe you. I believe you. No doubt. I'm sure your English is excellent. I've never seen that. And I don't know how they could explain it any other way. The Rashbam doubles down. Afal pishu lifnim. Maybe it means within the house. What did the Mishnah say? The language is more cryptic in the Mishnah. Within it. Maybe it means within the house. But afal pikein, the English translation of the art scroll, still doesn't really match. Basically, it's a storage room that's not used for anything other than storage. We have people are blessed with large kitchens and they have walk-in pantries. The room is pashut only used for storage. That's what we're talking about. That's not sold when a house is sold. That's what it seems like. I'm just basing it on the Rashbam's definition of the room is only used for storage. So if you have a walk-in, a walk-in closet is maybe. I don't know. People have changed clothes in their walk-in closet sometimes too. I don't know. But the storage room for your kitchen is pashut a storage room. There's no other function to it. So let's dig in. Hashta says the Gemara Yitzia Lam Yizdabin. Once you're saying that a Yitzia is not included in the pricing, a cheder which is not included in the sale, a cheder which is only used for storage mibaya, that should be pashut. We should only need the din of Yitzia, and we should know the din of cheder. So the Gemara on the top of Samach Aleph Amud Beis says Lo tzricha. We actually need to have both cases. The afal gab the meitzer la mitzre avroi keder Rav Nachman. What does this mean? There are two ways that we can measure a house. One is super detailed, which is to see an aerial view of the footprint of the house. The house on the east wall is 25 feet, on the back wall is 26 feet, whatever the details are. But there's another way to say it, which is le'avroi, which is to say, my neighbor to the east is shiur. My neighbor to the south is stein. My neighbor to the west is a non-Jewish family. My neighbors across the street are Rabbi Levin's. Okay, that's pretty broad. I mean, we have a street in the middle there, so it's not exact. But if we were to give that Meitzar Avroi, Kid Rav Nachman, what would we have known about Rav Nachman? We would have known that the same limits apply. Namely, what we learn from the word cheder is that even if we give a broader definition of what the footprint of our property is, these things will still not be included in the sale. So if I give you the footprint of my property with the exact dimensions of the east, west, north, and south of my property, okay, that's one din pashut that the cheder and the yitzia would not be included. But even if I gave a wider definition and said, my property is 40 by 125, 33 by 125, 60 by 120, even if I did that, the cheder still not included. And let's analyze Rav Nachman and see where he gets this from, where seemingly a broader definition is still equally not inclusive. Says the Gemara, the Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba bar Avuha. Hamocher bayis lechavero. A person sells a house to their friend, and he does so bebira gedola, in a very, very large cavernous building. Take a look at the Rashbam here, 8 lines down. Dibra maschal bira gedola. Bayis gadol hu upsuchin lo batim svivosav. It's basically, there's a central room, and off of that central room are a bunch of houses. It's an apartment building, right? So I'm selling you a house, an apartment within an apartment building. Now, even if I were to tell you the larger boundaries of the bira, I say, l'dugma, you're buying apartment 116 in Winston Towers. The footprint of Winston Towers is 150 feet by 80 feet. Well, what the footprint is? It's probably a horrible estimate, but whatever it is, says the Gemara, those are only mitzarim harchir chiblo. It doesn't mean you own the whole bira. It doesn't mean you own the whole, no, you own apartment 116. You knew what was for sale. You came to the store, to 116 to look that it's for sale. But Lamaisa, even though I gave you a broader definition, still, the same rules apply. You only get 116. So that's the Mari Mokum that we use to prove our case. Why did we say cheder in our Mishnah? To teach us a broader din, that even if I, the mocher, were to give you a broader set of parameters of the property, afal pikein, you still do not own the yitzia and you do not own the cheder. And drilling down on this case of Rav Nachman about the bira, the Gemara says, wait 1 second. Hey chidami. If you want to say that people are particular with their language, that a house is a house and a bira is a bira, so pshita, bayis zavinle, bira lo zavinle. I said apartment 116 is available. That's what's on the star. I walked you around and said, look at the footprint of the Winston Towers. Pasha that a bayis is a bayis, I'm only selling you 116. That can't be it. Ella says the Gemara, perhaps the bira nami karle bayis, that there are words that we kind of misuse. Come look at this property, which is not apartment, it's a larger word. If we say that bira and bayis are interchangeable, then really kule zavinle. If I walk in there to apartment 116 and you, the mocher, say the property is yours and property and bias are used loosely, you just sold me the whole lot. That can't be either. So says the Gemara, how do we understand the case of Rav Nachman in the name of Rabba bar Avua? Lo tzricha deruba karule lebayis bayis lebira bira. Most people talk in a particular way. A house is a house and the property is the property. The economy, there are a handful of people, the labira karule bayis, that they'll call the bira a house as well. Ma'udetema, you might have thought that with that language, that kule zavinle, that when you sell me that property, you really actually sell me everything. Kamash malan, that really in the contract, you should have had an extra clause if that was your intent. If your intent was to sell me the whole property, Kamash malan mi dehavale lemichta, what you should have written in the star is velo shiris bizvini elaine klum. I've left nothing for myself in this sale. Velo kasab, but he didn't write that. Therefore, shmamina shiur shiur. Pashat that he left something over for himself, and therefore bias is not a bira. And the Gemara now provides a second possible case, which is similar to what we were looking for, why we had the word cheder in our Mishnah, which is to teach us that broad boundaries don't change the rules, and still the Yitzi and the cheder would not be sold in the sale. And says the Gemara a third of the way down, and we'll be heading to the top line of Samach Beis and Aleph, and then we'll stop for the day. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua. Hamocher sadelecha vero bebika gedola. I'm selling you a field amidst many other fields in a very large agricultural valley. Afal pi shemeitzar lo mitzar achitzonim. Even though I gave you broader boundaries, your field is found in this massive 500-acre collection of agricultural fields. It's just mitzarim herchiblo. I just broadened it for you, but no. I'm selling you field number 2. You don't get every field. You only get field number 2, even if my boundaries were broader. So again, same line of questioning as we saw before. Hey chidami. What in the world is Rav Nachman in the name of Rabba bar Avua teaching us? If the mocher uses specific language, I'm selling you a field and I'm not selling you a whole bika, then pshita sada zavinle, bika lo zavinle. Then it's pashut that what you sold. If I use exacting language, I'm selling you apartment 116. I'm selling you field 2. And I don't use broad language of amidst the large. No, I'm selling you this property. I'm very specific. So that's pashut what's going on. So that can't be the case. The case of Rav Nachman in the name of Rabba bar Avua has to be more complicated than that. That's pashut. Says the Gemara, ve'ela dilabika nami karule sadeh. If we're saying where the bika also is referred to as a sadeh, and the guy said to me sadeh and bika are synonyms, and therefore kule zavinle, then pashut, I should own the whole thing if you're selling to me when you talk loosely like that. So that can't be the case either. So halfway down, the Gemara says lo tzricha. It must be the ika de sadeh karule sadeh, that they're ulabika bika, that most people. It says the ika. There's a little bit of a language change here on the side. Deruba karule l'sadeh sadeh ulabika bika. That's the right way to read our Gemara. And v'ika nami de lebika karule sadeh. That there is a handful of people who use these two phrases of bika and sadeh interchangeably. Ma'udetema, you might have thought that since there's a noticeable minority of people who use the term bika and sadeh interchangeably, that kule zavinle. It says the Gemara here, as it did before, that that's not enough. Kamash Malon, what we see from here is that if it was his intent to give away the whole bika, then he would have written it in the shtar. What the mocher would have said if he was trying to sell the whole lot is lo shiris bizvini elaine kadomai klum. I have left nothing for myself at all in this sale. The lo kasable, but he didn't write it that way. Shma mina shiur shiur. So these two Mari Makomos, both in the name of Rav Nachman and the name of Rabba bar Avua, come to show us why it is that we had the extra word cheder in our Mishnah. Yes, you're right. A cheder is more mechudash to say it's included in a sale. Once we know a yitzia is not included, we know pasha the cheder is not included. The room's only for storage. But when the reason for the cheder was to teach us this side that if I speak super broadly about the property, no, it is not more of an inclusive sale. The same rules apply. What's odd is that Rabba bar Avua gave pretty much identical cases. He gave the case of buying a bias amidst a larger property of a bira, And he gave an example also of a sadeh amidst a larger agricultural field of a bika. Why? Teach me one case and don't teach me the other. The Gemara hints to this by saying Vitzricha, 2/3 of the way down, Samach Aleph Amud Beis. We need both cases. We need the case that started on the second line of the page of Hamocher Bais L'Chaver Bebira Gedola. We also need the second case, which starts 1/3 of the way down of Hamocher Sada L'Chaver Bebika Gedola. Why do we need both cases? So says the Gemara, the Iyashmin and bias. If I only had the case, the first case of a house being sold in a larger property of a bira, Mishum daha tashmish talachud. Daha tashmish talachud. A house is being used to live in, but the bira is a social hall. It's where they play bingo. It's a lounge. It's totally not the same function. Nobody lives in the bira. People live in apartments. Aval bika de kula chada tashmishtahi. But an agricultural field, every field is doing the same thing. They're planting, they're watering, and they're harvesting. It's identical. So perhaps I would have thought that in that case, when the language is interchangeable between bika and sada, perhaps the whole field should have been sold. But that's not true. That's why we needed that second case of the sada and the bika. And v'yashmin and bika, if I only would have had the second case, the case of a sada being sold in a bika, well, mishum delo havalei lemimtzarle. In that case, there's no way to really give boundaries in agricultural fields. It's not like there were fences and walls between. Field number 1 is over there. When you hit the soybeans of your neighbors, you're done. Unlike an apartment where I can give a footprint, unlike a building where I can say the front wall is 25 amos, the back wall is 15 amos, and it's on a little bit of a trapezoid. I can say that. I can come up. But out in the field, where mishum delo havalei lemimtzarle, then it's no longer comparable. Aval bayis to havalei lemimtzarle v'lo matzarle kula zavinle. Perhaps I would have thought that with a house where you could have been specific, and maybe we would argue you should have been specific and you weren't. Now you're on the hook for selling the whole darn thing. So that the Gemara says, Tzricha, that's why we need both cases.
What's it called when people come by and they come with this scope and they measure how many feet it is from the curb? What's a survey? So a survey would be the right.
But they didn't, that's just not how their fields work. They didn't have clear lines of demarcation. Like we have pin numbers, we have it down to the inch. We know exactly what's going on. But
They had a guy with a string.
yeah, it's saying it was, and we've seen in other places in Shas, they would measure a thing with like a rope folded over, like, I didn't know you were referring to. Yeah. So needless to say, there was a margin of error for sure. And either way, when I would go to the owner of all the beacon and say, where's field number 2? He's like, it's down there. There's no other way of articulating to him exactly what it was. They didn't know. They just said, Yashar, you mean. That's exactly right. Vaz Tisha. So then the Gemara turns to one last, two small things until we get to the end of the day. Says the Gemara, Keman Azla, who is the following Shita like? Hada Amar Rabbi Mari Berei de Bas Shmuel. Rabbi Mari was the son of the daughter of Shmuel, Bar Shilas. Mishmei de Abaye. The following line was, Haiman de Bezavne Le Midi Lechavre. A person who wants to sell something in its entirety to his friend, what should he do? Tzarech lemichtav le lo shayres bizvini ilain kadomai klum. I've left nothing over for myself. I want to make a full sale. Everything in the 4 walls of what I'm selling you is yours. Everything. The Yitzia, the Ched, if you can do that. But then you have to write this language of like being mafkir every last little bit. So it says the Gemara, Kiman, Kirav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua. As we've seen twice above. That was his shita. That if you want to make a sale that's full and complete, and maybe that's what our contracts say now. I've never seen the contract. I mean, I've signed a bunch of them. Yeah, they're like sign here, sign here, sign here.
It says, and that's the answer. That's
In its entirety.
Everything else.
Mhm. Right. Which means that Lamaisa we hold like Rav Nachman. Not that it should be surprising, but it's just that the default is that you don't sell everything until you say you sell everything, which is probably an important halachic caveat. Lastly for today, a guy says to his friend, Ara de Bechia nizavnan alach. I want to sell you a property called Ara de Bechia. There's a problem though. Havoyle tarte arasad avamiskaran de Bechia. Guy had 2 properties, Karesh Fields. There's one in Lyle, Illinois. There's one in West Rogers Park, Illinois. And I have 2 of them. They have the same exact name. So if I say to Michael, I want to sell you the Karesh Fields, what's the halacha? Amar Ravashi, what do you think he meant? Chado Amar Le, Tarti Lo Amar Le. If I wanted to sell you both, I would have sold you both. I'm selling you the Karesh field. Okay.
Wasn't you have to be more specific?
No, the default over here is that as long as I say I'm selling you this field, then it's this field, even though there's another one with the same name in another
I
community.
can go to the wrong one.
That's possible. That's possible, but you're still not getting both.
He didn't use the
No, I'm
word,
not saying getting both, it's like, if I go to the wrong
You
one,
know
what happens?
Which one?
It could be that what he meant is I'm selling you. It
he
could
didn't
be
use a vav, he didn't use the word and, he just used a singular expression.
right, but he's asking a different question, which is it Karesh Field 1 or Karesh Field 2? Is it the one in this neighborhood? Because that the Gemara doesn't specify. But the Gemara assumes you only get one. It's a great question. It deserves a look in the Rishonim. But it doesn't specify at all. You only get one property. So says the Gemara, V'i Amar le arasa stama. If I said just lands in plural, then miut arasa shtaim. Arasa is a plural. Then you do get both. If I said to Michael, you get the Karesh Field lands, then he gets both properties.
Well, that's kind of obvious.
Yeah, I think the Gemara is in this case not much of a chiddush. That's correct. V'i amar le kol arasa. If I say you get all of the lands, then kol arasa the isle, then you get every field that I own. Levar mi bustani upardisi, except for fields that are being specifically cultivated or orchards. V'i amar le zihara. If I say the language of zihara, which the last Rashbam on the page says is kol hakarkos kurian kain. It's a more broad language, even more than kol arasa. Zihara is everything, the whole kit and caboodle. So then, afilu beibusanu pardis. So then you even get the lands that are being cultivated, as well as the orchards. Levar mibate ve'abde, except for these last mibate ve'abde, except for these last couple of things. Now, be'i amar le nichse. Nichse is the broadest of all terms, not just land, but all of my properties. Then afilu biti ve'abde. Then you really get everything. Rashi over at the Rashbam at the top of the page still excludes metaltalin, but everything that's the house structures themselves, the lands themselves, those you get. We'll stop right here. As you can see, there's a lot of pictures for tomorrow, and it doesn't look like a long blot. What?
Tactiles?
I thought about it. I'm still thinking about it, but I first have to learn the Daf, so I'll let you.
When,
We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
when I'm thinking